Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us for another great session powered by SAS. My name is Dan, and for the next 2 hours, I'm gonna be your host. Thanks a lot for joining today, and we have an amazing agenda. We are at our second edition right now. And I would like to tell you a little bit of info about our sessions, why do we do them, and what are we doing. So I'm part of GReAT. I'm based in Romania, and my team, GReAT, Global Research and Analysis team, is a global team with experts in more than 20 different countries. Most of us are working from home right now. Mostly, we did that before, but now with COVID-19, it's even more, we even work even more from home, like entire team is entirely remote. If you might have heard about us when we published research such as Shadowhammer or research into Lazarus, Blue Norov, and of course like Satellite Turla. These are some of my favorite APTs, I might say. During our within our team, we have internal sessions every month, and they are quite effective and engaging. So we've been running these sessions for more than 3 years now, and I think that we believe that they were like pretty interesting. We gave the people the chance to just come in, show something, a cool project for like 15 minutes, and then team members can ask questions, and we can interact with each other and just have a good time, you know. These sessions are like informal. There's no like some strict rule. There's no like specific time frame or anything. It's just people hanging out, colleagues hanging out, and then just presenting cool ideas. So we said, hey, why not open this up for the public? So of course, during this interesting time, we don't have a chance to meet with you at conferences anymore. So we said, let's make it a little bit more open, and let's open our great ideas to the public. So here we are on our second session. We ran our first session last month, and all the videos from the first session plus our blog posts are available. We will drop a link in the chat later today. Also, I'd like to announce that unfortunately, due to the current situation, we made a tough decision to reschedule the offline SAS event to next April. So this means that unfortunately, there's not going to be any Polinka at the end of October. But, you know, we're going to meet each other face to face, hopefully in April. But while this doesn't mean that we will not have a chance to actually meet virtually. And basically, we will be hosting an online conference with a lot of surprises. And we will, this SAS online conference will be held in the early October this year. So 6th, 8th of October. If you're interested to have a speech or provide a workshop, please contact us at our email address, thesascon@thesascon.com. We will drop the email address in the chat. We're also looking for partners. So, and co-sponsors for SAS Online. Please also hit us up if you would like to make a partnership or you'd like to co-sponsor SAS. And stay tuned for more info and agenda on our Twitter account, the SASCon. So with this being said, I would like to start our second GReAT Ideas event. We have great panelists. We have my colleague Brian, Ariel, Pierre, Boris, and my great friends from Latin America, Dima and Fabio. All of these speakers, they will have polls during which you can answer their questions. So feel free to you will see them popping up in your Zoom app. So feel free to answer those polls, and by answering them, the speakers will be able to interact with you, and you'll be able to feel the pulse of the conference, if you know what I mean. So without any further delay, I would like to invite to introduce Mr. Brian. Also, apologies for being this early. Yes, unfortunately, we will have virtual Polinka. Good morning, Brian. We can see you. How are you, man?
Morning. Yeah, no Palinka for me, just coffee.
Oh, well, um, yes, let's get starting.
All right, sounds good. Let me just try to readjust here so we don't have too much crazy business going on. Okay, share screen.
Also, guys, if you want some Palinka, please let me know. I'll try to get a lot of it with me next year for SAS. But in the meantime, I'll provide virtual Palinka.
Okay, can everybody, Dan, you can see my screen, yes?
Everything is good.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully you guys and folks will enjoy the presentations today. As Dan said, it's informal. We're not trying to do anything spectacular here, just kind of share some information. So first presentation today, I'm going to be talking about WellMess, which up until last week, most folks maybe had not heard about it. But given some current situations and circumstances and advisories, now it seems to be the talk of the town. So we had to kind of modify the presentation a little bit to add some more information, but hopefully today we can help quell some of the rumor that's been flying around, as well as kind of present to you just the facts that we have, not saying that everything is complete here, obviously, but maybe some of the information I provide today will help some other folks dig into the research a little more, and maybe we can all come up with some better answers. So everything started in 2018. LAC out of Japan actually put out a report about this new family called WellMess. And it was actually a pretty detailed report. It was pretty decent. I think the original one was maybe in Japanese, and then it was translated to English. But either way, the link is at the bottom. I would suggest, if you haven't read it, to go ahead and take a look. It's pretty decent. Kudos to those folks that put that out. Subsequently, two of the authors, I believe, from LAC actually presented at BotConf in 2018 as well. I think it was in December timeframe. They went into a little more technical detail about the malware, about the targeting, kind of the functionality, as well as some of their theories and such. And their full presentation is actually listed there too. Also suggested to go look at that, because we're not going to cover the technical details of the actual malware today. We're going to talk about some of the overall data that we see with regards to the attribution side. So some initial thoughts on what this WellMess thing was. Like I said, the reports were excellent in detail, but unfortunately they didn't give any kind of attribution hints. There was nothing in the initial write-up about who might be responsible or if it was linked to any known APT actors. They mentioned targeting was in Japan, specific against a couple organizations in Japan, but they don't actually give any details as well as to the motivation behind it, what kind of organizations they were, what kind of data the actors were after. So that also kind of left a huge gap for us to fill. And at the end, they basically say that they feel that WellMess was used as a stage 1. They said they noticed some PowerShell scripts being delivered as kind of the stage 2. So it looks like they were using WellMess as kind of the entry level access, and then they would, leapfrog from there into other systems. So regarding different variations of WellMess, they do mention that there was a .NET version as well as a Golang version. Specifically, the .NET version appears to be the oldest version that we can find in our data. It dates back to early 2018. I think it was maybe around January or February timeframe. What it appears happened is the .NET version was replaced with Golang. There was a period of time where we were seeing .NET and Golang being deployed at the same time, but they definitely have moved since then in the last 2 years to specifically Golang, from what we can tell. The Golang versions actually started being written in version 1.8, I believe. Yeah, 1.8. And today, the latest version we see is actually written in 1.18. So they are upgrading their platforms. They're sticking with Golang. It seems like this is the language of choice right now. We labeled 2 of the Golang versions GoElf and GoWin. So if you see any of our detections, that's basically the platform they're designed to run on. And we noticed some of the variations were actually packed with UPX, but there's really no explanation as to why some were packed and some weren't. That's still kind of a question for me. I'm guessing it was just for evasion techniques. Maybe they knew a little bit about the victims and decided to pack the malware before. Functionality-wise, the malware has actually remained the same since 2018. So for the last 2 years, there really hasn't been a lot of improvements in the malware. Nothing's really changed from that initial write-up. So again, I would refer everyone to that write-up if you're really interested in, for example, how to decrypt the C2 comms, the keys that are embedded inside, the different encryption algorithms and such. That's all detailed in there. So after the presentation, this was pretty much everybody in the industry. You know, okay, cool, they presented at BotConf. It's just yet another piece of malware that nobody knew about. I'm this lead APT hunter. I'm just gonna go ahead and move along and pay no attention to it. I will say that most of us, including myself, did that. Up until 2 years later this summer, I start hearing questions from people. And when I say questions from people, it's literally everyone in the community. I'm getting little chats that are saying, hey, have you heard about this WellMess thing? Myself included, I said, well, I remember something in 2018, but we haven't really been tracking it too much, just a couple of the C2s. So it was kind of interesting in that aspect that all of a sudden this spring, everyone started talking about it. So regarding the rootkit, these are things that I heard from the conversations with different researchers and different folks in the community up until last week, actually. So this slide was written before the advisories came out. So first things first, there was supposedly a new wave of activity that happened in the spring of 2020, starting in February timeframe, mostly in March, and continued through May. Hence the rootkit that we were hearing. So specifically, also another rumor that I heard was that it was targeting healthcare industry and more specifically COVID-19 research organizations, which was pretty interesting to me given the current global situation. It also kind of diverged from the original targeting, which was specifically in East Asia. So this was a little bit different. It was being used to focus on some different types of organizations. So that was interesting. And the last rumor that basically got everybody spun up was that some folks were talking about this being tied to APT29. I was hearing rumors of APT29 as far back as March when the first couple incidents appear to have happened. So the discussion about APT29 did not just start last week. This has been going on for a handful of months now. So at that point, I did what every researcher would do. When you hear APT29, you hear COVID research, vaccine, you hear all these buzzwords being thrown around, it's time to get rolling, right? So we start investigating. Before we get any further, we are gonna try to introduce something a little new and fresh into this. So if we could put up poll number 1, if you guys could just take a quick second and answer this just based on your thoughts right now. But basically, who do you think is behind WellMess? I'd be curious to see what the answer is on this. Moving along. So after our research, we started digging through all of our samples, our entire corpus of billions of samples we've collected over the years. And it basically confirms that WellMess started in early 2018. I was able to find a handful of campaigns. So these are the campaigns I was able to find in our samples, as well as mostly public samples that are on VirusTotal, and then backtracing to the C2s of when they were stood up. And what's interesting here is that it appears to follow a very specific pattern for the most part. There's a couple oddballs in there, but it looks like every 2 to 3 months, there's another wave of WellMess that happens. And it's very small, but it's very clear that they stand up a new set of C2s, they conduct a few operations, they shut everything down, and then they're quiet again for 2 to 3 months, and then they start another campaign. So this was kind of interesting because sometimes you don't see this with actors. It's not very clear cut, but in this case, it definitely was. So just making note of the latest campaigns. As far as C2 distribution, we thought, well, let's take a look at where all the C2s are laid out globally and see maybe there's some sort of concentration on a specific ISP or a server provider or something. And unfortunately, this is the map that I came up with. So over a span of 37 C2s that we were able to discover in the last 2 years of activity, this is basically where they were globally distributed. I believe the Swiss servers in particular, there was the most there with one provider. And then coming in second was Canada and US. So nothing really there as far as attribution or preferences to the actor. It just appears that they kind of use whatever they can find. So this slide here is basically kind of laying out to everyone what we are able to confirm, what we see with our data, and what we're not able to confirm based on the rootkit. So starting on the left, Again, most of our activity that we see in our data set, not saying this is the truth or you know, discounting the later stuff that happened this spring, but for us, most of the activity fell within the fall 2019 category, September, October, November timeframe. So we did see an increase of C2s in February of 2020, which kind of confirms this new wave that everyone is talking about. We were able to track the C2s based on a certificate that's listed in the advisory. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we saw a major spike in February. It continued all the way through about May timeframe, and then everything was shut off again. Throughout the 2-year span that we were able to find samples, we were only able to see actually 30 total samples over a period of 2 years. Now, when you're talking about an APT actor, which presumably this is, 30 samples of a specific piece of malware over a 2-year time frame is actually fairly low in my opinion. This kind of shows me that they only use this in specific cases. They're not spraying it out everywhere. They're being very meticulous about how they use it. And also regarding the C2s, as I said earlier, we found about 37 C2s over that 2-year time span as well. So not that much activity actually that we were able to kind of confirm. As far as victimization goes, or victimology, I should say, most of the victims we saw in our activity within our data set was targeting telcos, contracting companies, and government organizations specifically located in the Middle East and the EU. We did see some outliers here and there, but for the most part, that's where the activity was occurring. Now, we did see an interesting victim in Asia as well. Why I say this victim is interesting is because the organization had been targeted in the past by 3 other major APTs, 2 of which include the Lamberts and Sofasy. We also found some indications of some Chinese-based APT actors as well. So this victim was pretty interesting for us because they seemed to be one of those magnet of threats, if you will, and was being targeted by multiple actors. We also have data from a third party, actually 2 third-party partners, that shows us some of the management of the C2s. And this is a really interesting piece here and why I put an asterisk here. We are able to see that the actors are mostly managing the C2s using Tor nodes, which is pretty decent OPSEC because obviously there's not much we can do with that. But sporadically in that mix of data that we got, we do see some Chinese-based broadband IPs also being used to manage the C2s. Now, these are not just scanning IPs that are just hitting the box. This is full-blown management of the C2s, exfil of data, for example, from the victims. So this is definitely an interesting piece that needs to be discussed further. As far as OPSEC goes, we're able to confirm that it seems this actor has fairly decent OPSEC. They have split their C2 servers up for each victim. So it looks like they'll go after one victim organization, use 1 or 2 C2 servers for that, do what they have to do, shut those down, stand up a couple more for the next victim, and so on and so forth. So they're not reusing C2s for all of the victims. It seems it's very specific per organization. So things we can't confirm are what we don't see. We are not able to confirm the targeting of the healthcare related organizations or the COVID research. That could be very well just as simple as we don't have the visibility on those types of organizations. So we're not saying this is not true, we're just saying we can't confirm it. We also can't confirm any in the wild samples during spring of 2020. What we can say is that there are samples on VirusTotal that do appear were used during spring of 2020, but we don't see any actual usage on our platform, basically in our telemetry. So everything from spring of this year, we only have stuff that's from private partners, other researchers, or on VirusTotal. We also cannot confirm any links to APT29 in particular, or for that matter, any other known actors. We really don't have enough information to kind of say who this is. To us right now, this looks like a completely different group that we would categorize as, say, a temp actor or something along that line until we're able to get some more information onto who actually may be behind it. As I said earlier, we did not see any activity after May of 2020, so it appears that the C2s were torn down. There are a few stragglers that are still out there, but they're not being used from what we can see. but May appears to be the last of their activity that we were able to find. We also don't have any known second stage payloads. We see indications of PowerShell scripts being used, but unfortunately our telemetry data did not allow us to capture any of the actual payloads. So all we see is just indications and remnants that PowerShell scripts were used after the fact. And lastly, we also were not able to confirm initial infection vector. So typically we would see spearfishes or some sort of entry point for the actor to get in once the malware or before the malware was deployed. In this case, all we see is the malware being deployed on a box, and that's it. We don't know how it got there. We have no information that shows us initially how that happened. So those are the facts according to our data. If we could bring up the results from poll number 1, I'm curious to see who people think is actually behind. So, this is interesting. It's fairly spread out. So basically, some folks are essentially saying 29. Some other folks are possibly saying a Chinese-based actor, maybe another Russian-based actor, and none of the above. That's a pretty interesting poll here. Okay, so moving along. Oops, sorry, guys. So the big question everybody is probably wanting to know is, so who is behind it? Well, surprise, surprise, we have no idea. The data that we have just does not support any sort of our ability to make an attribution statement at this point. At a minimum, you know, we have a few data points that might indicate some leaning towards one actor or another, but right now there's just not enough information for us to make an accurate assessment on that. So regarding attribution, some of the points are earlier in the LAC write-up. They mentioned 2 things in particular. One is that the early versions of the malware were written specifically to support Japanese, Korean, and Chinese language characters in the malware. So that's kind of interesting that that was included on purpose. So just something to keep in mind. There were also some misspellings of common English words in the malware, which we do see, you know, obviously from some actors. But it kind of indicates that maybe there were some, they're not native English speakers, if you will. LAC also indicated another interesting tidbit, and it was regarding this tool named Ghost, not with G-H-O-S-T, but G-O-S-T. This is a tunneling software that they said was being used as kind of a second stage to kind of laterally move around in networks. What's interesting about this is it's also developed in Golang, and it's also written by a Chinese developer. So it is available in GitHub, and it's open source, so anyone could go use it, but it was interesting that that tool in particular was chosen early on for some tunneling activity. And lastly, again, our third-party data does show these occasional connections and management from Chinese-based broadband IPs. This is something that any normal analyst could not just discount. I'm not sure if anyone else has this information, but if they do, it would be really interesting to see how our data might match up with that. Now, I mentioned that because this could also be a false flag. If you guys know me or Juan very well, we like to talk about false flags all the time. And if that's the case, this could be a very masterful false flag. Other actors have been known to compromise routers, for instance, in the past and use those as hop points for some of their operational activity. So this could be someone trying to point the finger at somewhere else, but we just don't know. The fact of the matter is management did come from those IP addresses. So we thought everything was fine, and then last week happened. Somebody decided to throw a wrench into things, and everything kind of changed a little bit. The cat was out of the proverbial bag, if you will. So the advisory came out last week from NCSC, as well as CSE and NSA. All 3 were backing the attribution statement that this activity targeting COVID-19 research or vaccine development was attributed to APT29. That's a pretty bold statement to come out and make, which again, it's 3 very large intelligence agencies that have very good data. So it's hard to discount that. They say that WellMess was used obviously in the attacks, as well as a new piece of malware that's previously unattributed named WellMail. And previously WellMess had not been attributed to APT29. So those are kind of the important statements made in that advisory. So before we go any further, poll number 2, if we could bring up, it's a question on whether or not government agencies, when they make a claim like this, should they be required to provide some level of information regarding these attribution statements? Yes, they should provide it all the time. Yes, they should provide it, but in some cases they should at least state sources and methods because of classified information, for example, or there's no need, we trust them, and that's that. So if you guys could answer that, that would be interesting. Moving along. So what has changed now since the advisory? What new information were we able to glean from that? Well, the first thing is the initial infection vector. Initially, I said we didn't know what it was. Well, based on the advisory, they're saying that the actors appear to have been targeting these organizations directly, specifically their external infrastructure, whether it was VPNs or firewalls. They named a few CVEs in the advisory. So it looks like maybe they were looking for known exploits that existed on this external infrastructure, compromise those external devices, and then use that to deploy within the network. We also learned about WellMail. This was previously unknown to us. We had not seen this in the past. There are definite similarities to WellMess. The malware does look similar. It functions very similar, but there's also some very big differences there. So we believe that they were correct in classifying that as a different malware family. They also mentioned something called Sourfang. So Sourfang was basically the primary pre-stage 1, if you will, the initial infection vector on some organizations, and it was targeting the SANG4 VPN devices in particular. Once they compromised the device, they would turn around and upload a new update binary to those devices and then push that, presumably WellMess, to the internal organization. And lastly, another new piece of information, if people had been tracking this infrastructure previously, you would know that a lot of us did not talk about this certificate. Well, it's out in the public now, so they kind of outed a very easy way to track the infrastructure. So if you are into looking at automated queries on census, if you look at the subject DN, that C Tunis IT, you're able to find most of the C2s as they pop up. So what about attribution now, given the advisories? Well, we cannot just discount that 3 intelligence agencies came out together, banded together and said this is APT29. That carries a lot of weight when you have that sort of attribution statement made in the public. It's pretty bold and it is pretty big. In the same breath, the advisory just did not provide any sort of information at all as to why the 29 attribution was the conclusion was come to. So unfortunately, they didn't even mention sources and methods. It's just literally, this is APT 29 and that's it. Most of us like to question those types of claims if it was made by, say, another vendor. I personally feel like that should also be questioned when governments come out and say that. There could be other alternatives or motives behind this. We're really not sure, but data speaks for itself. Let's see some data. Also, prior to 29 or prior APT 29 TTPs just do not fit this whole operation. If you look at the Polyglot Duke and Fat Duke and Reg Duke report that came out, I think it was last year, that's a whole other ball of wax. If you look at the TTPs for this activity compared to all the other prior 29 TTPs, it's putting a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't fit. Not saying it's not 29, but again, it raises some questions. And also in the advisory, I'd be happy to hear someone try to explain why this IP is in there, but this specific .167 IP is included in the report, and we have yet to be able to find any sort of samples or anything that uses this as a C2. So we're kind of curious as to why this IP is even in there. It might be in there on purpose. It might be in there erroneously, but we feel someone should probably look at that and maybe make a revision to the advisory. So some other little tiny tidbits on attribution real quick. The first being the .168 IP address. So it's one away from the 167 I just mentioned. If you look at passive DNS, there's actually a domain or two that are included in here, OneDriveJP.com and players.wincodec.com. The WinCodec domain in particular was actually mentioned in the BFV cyber brief way back when. And they call that domain out as being used by Sophacy or 28 during some of the activity against the German government. And there was also a write-up from someone during the SANG4 Dark Hotel stuff where they were looking at other Sang4 samples. They were able to find what I believe NCSC is calling the Sorfang malware or binary. They found that and they linked that to 28 based on the previous wing codec domain. So those three things kind of point to a potential link to 28, but again, it's very weak at best. A more interesting piece of information we found was the 191 address that I have listed here. So this is listed as a command and control server. It was used in March of 2018. So if you see here, this is some private data that we have in our telemetry that shows the 191 address in June of 2018, so 3 months later, was hosting all of this malware. Now, if we were to go through and look at this malware in particular, it turns out this malware is very commonly associated with Chinese-based APT actors. In particular, we believe this was someone we refer to as Cactus Pete. So at that time, in June of 2018, this server, which was listed in the advisory as a WellMess C2 in March, 3 months later was hosting a plethora of Chinese malware that we commonly attribute to Cactus Pete. Now, in the same breath, I went back into the Shodan data historically, and I look at the server in particular on port 80. And you can see here, there's a very clear delineation in April, I guess, April 22nd and June 9th. It appears that the server was reconfigured at least twice in that 3-month time frame. Now, what's the chances of APT29 randomly grabbing an IP address that was used 3 months prior from a known Chinese-based or Chinese-speaking APT actor? I don't know. It's obviously a chance, but in my mind, this could be possibly rolling the server over to another team. Many people have talked about the digital quartermaster situation with many of these teams as far as developers go. This is definitely something that needs to be looked into more. I'm hoping that someone listening may have more data on this IP address in particular. So poll number 2 results, if we could bring them up real quick, and then we should be able to finish up. Most people think that government should actually list, at least say, sources and methods. I tend to agree with that, but that's interesting. Very few people said they believe them, just trust them. That's cool. Okay, moving along. So where do we go from here? Well, it's pretty simple. If you're not already looking for this malware, you should start looking for it. We discounted it 2 years ago. It's clearly something of importance right now. Whoever is using it to target a very important target vertical right now regarding COVID vaccines. The entire globe is dealing with this situation, so we need to start looking for this. I mentioned the periodicity of the campaigns earlier, and I'm wondering maybe there's a wave coming in August. I don't know, but if you follow that every 2 to 3 month period, sometime late summer, we might see something else. So we should be keeping an eye on this and looking for infrastructure. In the same breath here, infrastructure-wise, it was trackable. It still is based on that certificate. But unfortunately, now that that's been made public, I'm sure the actor, whoever it is, will probably change that certificate and make sure they don't reuse the same thing over and over again. So that's probably going to go away. Hopefully, we can latch on to them in the future and find some other mistake that they made. The biggest thing here that I'd like to end with is if you have data, if you have questions, if you have information, we would love to share what we have with you. We're trying to gather as much data as we can so we can make a decent assessment on attribution here, so we can learn more about what they do second stage and beyond, or if there's any new waves that maybe we're not seeing because of our clients or victimology here. So the more information, the better. I would hope that somebody out there is willing to share. But if you are, please send an email to that Intel reports, let us know, or just DM me on Twitter or however you can get to me, Keybase, and maybe we can talk and share some stuff. So that's about it, Mr. Dan.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah. So, good. We have time for
Let's do 1 or 2 questions. Yeah?
1 or 2 questions, yeah. I will pick this one from Christopher. Basically, he's asking if you're with Kaspersky, and yes, you are a principal security researcher. You've been
Yes.
with we've been colleagues since 2016, if I remember well.
15.
15, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's been an amazing journey. I really enjoy working with you. So
Can
yeah,
we,
Brian.
I'd like to answer the question on the C2 management, actually. Greg Lesniewicz, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
forget your last name probably.
Yeah.
Well, so Greg says, do you think the good C2 management OPSEC is undercut by the reuse certificate? Or do you think the actor has accepted that risk of easily clustering their C2s together, but deniable attribution? I think it's a fantastic question, actually. I feel like it was a mistake. I feel like they just rolled, if I were a betting man, they have a builder that goes out and sets these C2s up, and the certificate is hard-coded into this deployment builder where they just drop, for instance, a binary or a script onto a server once they've got it or compromised it, and it runs. And it drops the certificate. It potentially creates everything on the system. It's all automated. So in that case, I think they did it for ease of deployment, and probably maybe just didn't think about the ability to track that. But it is a good question, and we do see actors on occasion doing that. It's a very good thing to look at if you're into tracking actors. Always look at the SSL certs or the TLS certs. Many times you'll be able to find some reuse and some other infrastructure you otherwise didn't know about. So.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Of course, Brian is asking if you're working out, and I would say yes. We did a workout session just 1 hour ago.
I quit drinking, man. I dropped
only virtual palinka, yeah.
Anyway, real quick, I'm going to let everyone else go because we are out of time.
Yep.
But I will try to answer any of the questions written. So I'll go ahead while the next presenter is going, and I'll try to answer them. So keep an eye on the Q&A screen.
Yeah, so keep an eye for Brian's answers. Also, thanks a lot, Brian, for joining us.
Okay.
Also, I would like to mention that we have an AMA session, Ask Me Anything, at the end of our, like after Dima and Fabio's presentation. During this AMA session, we will be joined by our one and only great director, Mr. Costin Raiu. So feel free to stay up until the end, where we will hang out and we will try to answer any of your other questions that we didn't have time to answer during right now. Also, we have some gifts for the most interesting questions, and basically just hit the Q&A tab, hit us up, and then we'll see. Next speaker is Mr. Ariel.
Hey.
Hello, how are you, man?
Very well, how are you doing?
Oh man, I like your background.
Yeah, under the sea, I mean.
Of course. Well, for everybody, if you don't know Ariel, you can check his Twitter icon, and you'll understand exactly.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Ariel, you're gonna be talking to us about?
Yeah, new feature in VirusTotal. Let me just get my screen ready.
I think, yeah, let's, it's still, we're still waiting.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
You can see my presentation.
Yeah, we can see it. Carry on.
Yeah. All right. So today I'd like to share with you a new beta feature of VirusTotal that I think you can put to use in your hunting efforts. I'll show you an example of how I use it, some tools I developed, and some ideas on how we can develop it further. So we're quite short in time. I'll just jump right into it. Today we'll be talking about this new beta search modifier from VirusTotal. Some background about this, it is developed as a fun side project by Juan Infantes Diaz from VirusTotal. I met Juan in last year's Security Analyst Summit, SAS, in Singapore. I've been beta testing it and playing with its feature for the last 3 months. And during the time, Juan fixed many bugs and improved it, but it is very much in beta. So please keep it in mind. This is how it looks like using VirusTotal web interface. You basically provide it with any PE file hash, and it will return similar samples together with their similarity rating in %. This search modifier is different than the other similarity options already in VT. They are either based on vhash, VirusTotal fuzzy hash, or other metadata information that is shared between the samples. In this case, we're actually extracting code blocks from that sample and looking for other samples using these code blocks. So how does it work roughly? Code blocks are extracted from the sample you provide. These code blocks are compared to a database of code blocks in VirusTotal. VirusTotal does a calculation using the length of the common blocks and the length of the total code blocks found in the file in order to come out with some similarity score. And it will return to you a list of matching samples together with the similarity score. Few words about the code block database in VirusTotal right now. It's very limited. It contains a very small amount of samples that Juan processed. It's just from the last couple of months. And this is just because all of it is still a proof of concept. So in our case, we will take Turla's carbon DLL implant. By running its hash with the code similarity modifier, VT will find over 100 similar samples, but actually showing you just 100 samples since the search results are capped. And in this case, actually, all of those 100 samples that come back to you are over 50% similar. So that's all pretty cool, but yeah, what can we do with it? We got lots of samples. I mean, are all of them relevant? Can we blindly rely on the similarity rating? You can see that the top two samples have the same similarity rating as the third one, but they have 0 detection. And I mean, out of the malicious samples, how many of them are actually just commodity or really related to the Turtle sample we provided in the beginning? What about samples that have 0 detection? Should we take a look into them? I mean, there are lots of questions. Before we go further, let's just talk about the limitation of this new feature. So as of now, this feature is made to work with PE files, either executables or DLLs. Like I said, the sample set, the database of the code blocks in VirusTotal is limited. Packed samples are an issue because VirusTotal does not unpack them on the fly. So if you just take code blocks from a packed sample, it's most likely it would be useless. Sometimes code blocks that are returned to you are actually subsets of each other. That's something that Juan is still thinking on how to best address. You cannot chain this search modifier with other search modifiers in VirusTotal, meaning you can't do code similar to hash and number of positive and first seen or any other thing. The code blocks that are extracted from the samples can be actually benign. That means that they could be functions in the samples that are third library, shared functions. There is no whitelist of good, so to say, code blocks in VirusTotal. And of course, since this is all very much in beta, there are bugs in the code similarity calculation. And that's just because it's a new feature and, you know, it's just trying to see what's the best way to address it. Based on your interest, it could develop further. I mean, the whole idea here is to share it with the community and see how many people find it useful. So let's talk about our goal here. Despite all of those limitations, I still think we can leverage it in hunting for APTs. The goal I made here is to move from having one attributed sample, which in our case is this Turla carbon implant, to new samples of the same APT. And I would like to do it in the most automated way possible with the least effort. To do this, I developed 2 tools. The first one is a Maltego transform, a very simple one. And the second one is a custom Python Yara generator. Let's start with the Maltego transform. It's a pretty straightforward transform. You pivot from a hash to other hashes that are over a given similarity threshold. You can configure what is your minimal similarity rating that you are interested in, and it will just populate your graph with samples over this threshold. The Yara generator is a bit more complex. It accepts one or more hashes, so you can do a batch of hashes at once. It asks for a minimal similarity threshold and also a minimal code block size, and it allows you just to fine-tune your search on VirusTotal. So yeah, let's talk about how the Yara generator works. You're provided with a hash, a similarity threshold, and a code block size threshold. It goes to VirusTotal and it gathers similar samples that are over these thresholds you set. For each sample, it would populate all the code blocks that it found in it and provide you with basically a dictionary of those code blocks and the amount of times that we saw them. It would also look at the sample file size, and it would say the minimum file size seen over all the samples and the maximum file size seen over all the samples. And it will just iterate through all of them. So you can see it found some of the code blocks repeating in the same second sample, so it's up their number, and also the file size change. And it goes on and on and on until in the end you're left with this nice list of code blocks, their popularity, and the file size range. Then it will take this and start to prune the least popular code blocks. So since it knows which code blocks is the most popular, again, the one that we saw across as many samples returned from VirusTotal, you could actually choose which one you want to prune out, which one you don't want to include in your Yara rule. What we're left with is what I call the most popular code blocks. And then what we do is take those most popular code blocks and check how many of them existing in the original sample, because I want to make sure that I actually catch the original sample. And that is basically the minimal condition that I put in the Yara rule. Let's see it run. Let me quickly try to share my terminal. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So here it's very simple. I just provided the hash of the sample that I'm interested in and a threshold of 80%, because like I said, we got like 100 samples over 50%. And by running it, it will tell me that it extracted 12 code blocks from the original sample. It parsed 93 samples that were over this similarity threshold of 80%. And it would also tell me the file size range of all those samples. Then it would ask me how many of the top most popular code blocks I would like to keep, provided with 10, and it would just generate the Yara rule. Very straightforward. Now, let's take a look at the Yara rule here because it's much easier. This is basically how the Yara rule is looking right now. Again, it's all just very in beta. I mean, it's just a way that I found it easier to present. So I'm giving you some basic information that would help you to tweak it. Showing you the list of the code blocks and the amount of time that I saw it, and the file size and the minimal condition, as I said. Now, all of it, of course, is a suggestion. It's a guideline. I mean, you should probably put effort and add and adjust it as you see fit, using your experience and, of course, what you can learn about the malware by analyzing it. Actually, at this point, I would like to, Dan, if you could pop up the pool, I would like to ask the viewers, what is your opinion about incorporating code blocks in your Yara signatures? And what I'm actually talking about is code blocks of functions. For example, if you use the IDA plugin MK Yara, and you can actually select some functions in IDA and create a Yara rule based on them. I'm not talking about hex representation of strings or any encryption keys or anything like that. Okay, let's carry on. There is more you could do with the Yara generator that I'm currently not doing. It can be improved. I'm actually storing the assembly code for each code block, and I can print it to the user to make it way easier to understand which code block you want to keep and is interesting. And I also store all the offsets seen for each code blocks across all the samples. I currently don't use it because I still haven't figured out what's the best way. But I think we can do quite cool stuff by chaining them or using the offset scene in order to give some boundaries to where you want the code block to appear. I'll release the tool it will be on my GitHub and I will tweet it just in the next couple of days. I would be happy for any ideas you have or any pull requests or anything you would like to contribute. I see it as kind of like a way to see how interesting this new feature is. Okay, so now that we have our Yara rule, let's put it to use. You can tweak it as you wish, although in my case, I didn't touch it. You can use it to hunt things offline in your organization. But since we're looking for APT samples, I suggest hunting online. And I would like to go with VirusTotal retro hunt in this presentation, since you could all do the same. To save time, I'll just show you the results that I got. Basically, using the auto-generated Yara without changing it, on RetroHunt, we get 285 matching samples uploaded in the last year. Here, the question still stands. I mean, how many of them are relevant to our Trula samples? You know, now we have even more samples, how we should go about filtering the relevant results out of them. And for this, I think KTAE could really help us. This is where KTAE comes into play. I say KTAE because it's easier to pronounce, but KTAE is actually Kaspersky threat attribution engine. And what it does, it extracts relevant genotypes using our own intelligence to only match on the relevant parts of the malware. It gives you a reputation score of the sample to an APT actor. We're currently tracking over 800 actors. And it can also tell you if the sample is clean and whitelisted. Costin gave an in-depth demonstration about KTAE before and wrote about it. If you want to know more, I just suggest watching the last Great Ideas session. So how about we take the RetroHunt result and just push them into KTAE? Let's see what that gives us. I'll quickly switch my screen. Okay.
We can see your screen, yeah.
Excellent. So basically, that's the interface. Here I can just dump the results from the RetroHunt that I just downloaded. And you can see that the unpack checkbox is ticked, which means KTAE will try to unpack any packed samples it goes through. This kind of solves the issue where you have packed samples and you can just take code blocks straight out of them without trying to unpack them. And since I have great internet, maybe that's the best time to show the pull results. All right, so it looks like lots of you, over 60%, find it useful and would give this new feature a go. That's actually great. I mean, Juan unfortunately couldn't be today to join the presentation, but he would be very happy to see about that. That's pretty cool. 9 of you say that you get along without. That's interesting too. I mean, yeah, whatever works. So you can see that KTAE is basically going through the samples and giving me the results. And I think beyond telling me which samples are similar to an APT actor, it's also telling me which sample is whitelisted. And I find it super valuable when working with large volumes of samples. Let me quickly switch back to my presentation. Okay, so in short, taking the conclusions from the KTAE output, I can tell you that out of 285 matches on the Yara wall from the last year, there were 28 samples that matched Trula with over 99% confidence. We basically jumped from hundreds of unknown samples to just a few of them in a matter of seconds using KTAE. All in all, we moved from 1 attributed sample to 285 samples, which is not that great, and then back to 28 Trula samples. A bit more in-depth analysis of the KTAE output, there were, like I said, 28 samples that were almost 100% confident related to Trula, which makes 10% out of the results. But 69% of the result, 195 samples, are actually whitelisted. And I don't need to spend time looking into them. 61 samples, 21% are unidentified. So I'll probably take a look at them. And out of those 28 samples, I can tell you that 16 were new to us. We didn't know about them before. So to sum things up, using this new beta feature of VirusTotal and taking its output to generate Yara rules, we can hunt for new samples in the wild pretty easily. Then to make our life easier, we can leverage KTAE to filter for samples containing genotypes of APT groups we're tracking. I had great success in looking for various APT groups. Turla was great, Ocean Lotus, Strong PT, and others. And that was just with the limited code block database that currently is being held. If you find it interesting and there is interest and many people use it, for sure, VirusTotal would try to process almost any relevant sample, and I'm sure we could find pretty cool stuff there. So yeah, that's pretty much all for me. Thank you for your attention, and let's stay in touch. If you have any questions about this feature itself, please ping Juan, that's his Twitter handle. If you have questions about the tools or the methodology, ping me directly. I'll be sharing and making the code GitHub very soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your question, for your presentation. Sorry, guys. Let's move on to questions. We have some questions. I think we have time for one or two. I think there's like a question for JAGS. Is there a way for individual researchers to get access to KTAE?
So it's KTAE or KTAE is a corporate solution. I mean, it's a thing that we are that big corporates are usually using, our customers. And if you have interest in it, I can't give you access directly, but I suggest that you send us an email to intelreports@kaspersky.com, and we can go case by case in sharing access. What is scrambled eggs? Scrambled eggs is a packer that is used by Turla. And I see Abdullah asked if I can use KTAE without submitting my samples. Yes, so KTAE is basically built to be air-gapped. KTAE does not share any samples with any other, with us even. I mean, it doesn't send to VirusTotal anything. It just works by that you give KTAE your sample locally in an offline instance, and it's just using its own database to give the results back. And there was another question about the new VTD code feature. I haven't tried it. I spoke with Juan about it. He's actually also working on it. He's comparing the results from this script to whatever they're using to generate the similarity, but I don't know much about it.
Okay, so thanks a lot. The other questions, we will be answering them. Some of them we will be answering during our AMA session at the end of, after our presentations. So stay tuned till the end. We're gonna have a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Mr. Ariel, for this amazing VirusTotal Kung Fu. Like you're always like the VirusTotal master. So like, it's a pleasure to like watch you in action.
Catch you later. Ciao.
Thanks a lot. Now we're gonna move to my friend from France, which is Mr. Pierre.
How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. We can see you.
Hi, great.
Nice picture on your wall.
Oh, thank you. Let me share the screen.
Yep, Mr. Pierre is gonna talk to us about something which is pretty interesting for me, mostly because I'm a Linux fan. As of course, we recommend you guys using all mixed and matching distributions. So use Windows, use macOS, use Linux. Personally, I prefer out of all of these three main types, I prefer Linux. And you're gonna talk to us about a new Linux rootkit, no?
I will talk about Linux rootkit here. Exactly.
Thank you.
So here we go. Hello to everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm Pierre, a senior security researcher with GReAT. I'm living in France, and I was previously a CISO for a multinational agricultural company. and a threat intelligence team manager within the French government. We will talk about Cloud Snooper, a set of malicious tools initially presented by Sophos in a public report in February as tools that were specifically targeting cloud providers. And well, we will mainly talk about Snoopy from Sophos presented tools, a couple of previously unknown GNU Linux backdoors, course or attention, a Linux kernel rootkit and its companion userland binary, which is called Snoopy. And of course, I will show you how this backdoor can be found at scale. So how could one find the rootkit malicious singularity in the first place? So let's say that you are working as a security analyst somewhere around the company and that the system admin come to you with a bit of a surprise with this question: how come my super secret remote access gateway server is also a name server now? So now we have a box which is supposedly, say, a SSH gateway, but that is suddenly acting as a name server. And just to warm you up, you will get some polls during the talk. Okay. So knowing how sysadmins can sometimes lose their minds, or more like mess with their own boxes, you ask for a proof. So here you just query the given server with a DNS request from your laptop. And as you can see from the screenshots, the server is actually responding to DNS requests. We can monitor that on the server with a packet capture, and we can see the DNS reply. Okay, so far we just have a DNS dialog with the server. So a DNS service could have been enabled by error on the box, like there are some on-duty sysadmins per day on the same box, and one of them messed with the runbooks while updating the server. But first, there are no DNS services running on the box at all. The sysadmins are sure of that. So we start a dummy service. We just listen on UDP 53 with Netcat. And using the same test DNS queries than before, we can see the dummy DNS service does not receive anything, even if the server is actually answering the DNS request. So we've seen that in packet captures. And now that's an issue. Where did my DNS request go? But that's not quite it. If we look at the IP tables on the server, we can see that it only allows established connections and SSH connection. But it is supposed to reject everything else, including our DNS query, that nonetheless got answered to. So now we are pretty sure that something is wrong on the server and that the sysadmin surprise was actually justified. We'll start investigating the server with this question: what legitimate kernel module should be loaded on a regular GNU Linux server or virtual machine nowadays? And the screenshot you will see is not a good answer. I will let you at it for a few seconds, but you will see how obvious it is. So let me zoom this and zoom it again. And yeah, we are talking about this floppy, the floppy disk, and I do not think that there are floppy disk drives on recent Linux servers and VMs. So now that we spotted a live suspicious kernel module, what could be done to understand how it works? Well, we could attempt to debug it. It is feasible in theory, but we are talking about kernel debugging here, and that's not a petty task. The operation itself is error prone, and at the very end, we would still need the kernel module file because we need to compile the kernel again and load the module again to get debugging information. So that's kind of a dead end for now. Another less subtle but straight to the point approach would just be searching for the supposed kernel module image file, which is the binary code that is loaded by the kernel as a module. Knowing the module name, we can start by looking for a similarly named file in the standard GNU Linux module directory for the current kernel. Or if you are in a hurry, of course, you can just grep the module name out of all your files. And now we would have a kernel module image to analyze. So I was not really used to Linux binary analysis back then, so I had to go step by step. I have a file, but what then? And let me just ask another question for you guys. So step by step, I go. First analysis, instinctive check, is that a cat? Well, no, obviously the file is not a cat, so that is certainly a dog then. Next step. More seriously, a very first straightforward step would be to read basic file information with strings and readelf. As the kernel image, the kernel module image is first of all an ELF binary. And from there, we can already spot interesting clues. The kernel module relies on functions that allow to run processes in userland, which in turn mean that the rootkit probably comes with a binary friend in regular userland space. And then most of all, we can spot possible calls to NF register hooks, which means that the kernel module will most probably mess with our kernel network filtering. That will explain the DNS request datagram going through the IP tables, bricks and mortar. And then, well, we will have to go for the time-consuming reverse engineering part to know more. Now, I am not of a top-notch reverse engineering guy, but luckily I had some Linux system knowledge. I had some kernel modules that still included some debug symbols at end and good software. Here we might think that good software come with not such of a good price, but I actually did this first work with GReAT. So I would like to warmly thank the NSA as its open source software is a more than decent one, and it's a free one. From first reverse engineering steps, we can see that the kernel module actually embeds a RC4 encrypted payload, which will be run on the userland and named as Snoopy. Here goes our userland backdoor dog. We can also discover that the kernel module will intercept IP network packets from a very specific point of the kernel netfilter packet processing flow. The point is called inet local in. It's a point which is just after IP routing, but just before the packets are actually sent to the transport protocols processing. So being hooked in there, the rootkit will be able to take a decision on the IP packets before they are processed by most IP table rules. So to spare you all the subsequent steps, we will take the warp zone. Here is the diagram of the actual rootkit and Snoopy backdoor couple interaction that I could find from the code. First, the kernel rootkit, which hooked itself into the netfilter flow, is set to consider IP packets that come from specific ports, meaning that any packet that comes to the server from such a specific port will be handled by the rootkit first, before any other application. This means that the rootkit actually allows for host firewall bypass on the only condition that the packet could reach the server first. Then the kernel rootkit changes the incoming packet destination port for one that the Snoopy userland backdoor is listening to, and put the packet back in the local network flow as an accepted one, so that it will reach the Snoopy backdoor. The Snoopy backdoor processes the packet and sends results to the network stack, switching incoming packet source and destination ports. In the same way that the kernel rootkit intercepted incoming packet, it will intercept packets going out of the server to the same specific ports so that it can mingle again with it and put it on the network card. In that way, any incoming packets that are sent from a specific port and that are actually command and control communication will bypass host firewall and are covertly processed by a userland backdoor that can transparently reply to the C2 client. The Snoopy backdoor is then what you could expect from a backdoor, a process that will run commands on the host, send back results, receive or send files, and establish tunnels to local or remote services. So the Snoopy backdoor will receive covertly processed IP packets that can contain UDP datagrams or TCP segments as commands. Now, an interesting thing with the Snoopy backdoor is that it implements a whole custom application protocol stack in an agnostic way over UDP or TCP. This is a quite well-developed academic style application protocol, which sums up to this diagram. First, the UDP or TCP payload must contain DNS or HTTP lookalike bytes. The Snoopy backdoor will only process those that start with a DNS query over UDP or with an HTTP GET request over TCP. Then the following bytes are leveraged as what is called a net message, which is like a network layer of a full protocol stack. Then the net message encapsulates a RT proto message, which in turn is like a transport layer of a full protocol stack. And at the end, the RT proto embeds an application message of various types that are actual commands to the backdoors or feedback from it. This last protocol part is encrypted with RC4. Every part of this application protocol stack starts with fixed constants called magics. Having reversed Snoopy's full custom application protocol logic, a whole new horizons appears now. First thing is that a specific message type, which is normally used as an initial dialogue to set up tunnels, can be leveraged as a sort of ping where the acting C2 would set a ping and the Snoopy backdoor would reply with a pong. So let's start with that. As Snoopy command and control messages can be sent over UDP, we can send one-way packets to servers without establishing a connection. And we can expect Snoopy compromised servers to answer with a pong. One trick we found to do that at scale, actually very, very quickly, like scanning the whole IPv4 space in a few hours, is to leverage the ZMAP network scanner. The ZMAP network scanner allows to send UDP datagrams with a user-specified network order hexadecimal payload. In that case, and having reversed the Snoopy logic, we could easily craft a valid C2 ping message. Background colors that you will see in the hexadecimal payload are associated to previously shown C2 application protocol stack. White is UDP, so in that case, correctly formed DNS request. Green shades are NetProto and RRT Proto, and red plus black are the actual RC4 encrypted ping message that the Snoopy backdoor will decrypt and process. Answers from Snoopy can easily be found in results as datagrams contains RC4 encrypted fixed constants or magic bytes. So in that case, a mere grep would give you the compromised server's IPs from ZMAP results. Pretty simple. And here is our last question for you guys. So of course, that was just a first step. Next one could obviously be coding a full multiprocess and multi-threads client that would allow to interact with Snoopy backdoor and gather additional malicious sample, or even simply disable the rootkit and backdoor because they implement self-disable command. But thanks to sharp Yaras on the Snoopy backdoor and our KTAE code similarity tool, we actually found the malicious actor's real C2 client as it shared most of its code with the Snoopy backdoor. Now, a few more words on the Snoopy backdoor. First, of course, a mere monitoring would enable spotting Snoopy on your server. And malicious actors probably succeeded at compromising host and staying long because they were left alone Linux systems that no one monitored. Then you may have spotted Chinese written error message in the previous screen. That are messages that the backdoor can send as an answer to some file-based commands. One may think this is an obvious pointer at Chinese-speaking developers, but these messages are the only ones that can be sent back on the network from Snoopy to a remote host. So they are the only ones that can be spotted by a remote third party, which would try to maybe blindly interact with the backdoor. All other messages, including all debug messages that some backdoor sample displayed with a specific undocumented debug option, or the C2 client messages are all written in English. Another hint is that we actually found compromised servers in China. So we think that these messages were just trying to masquerade real developers' language and origin. The Snoopy backdoor and associated rootkits have been found in various versions, and some version numbers or compilers and libraries version indicate that development was already started in 2016. And the development may have ended somewhere around 2018. The Snoopy backdoor first appeared in the wild on a multi-scanner web service in December 2018. We believe that associated actors developed another variant after this one that still have to be found. Last but not least, one may wonder how the servers were initially compromised. We found additional tools that we suspect are from the same actor and that were aimed at massively scanning network exposed services for known vulnerabilities or weak credentials. As the rootkit or the backdoor does not implement any persistence mechanism, we think that the associated actor simply added the kernel module rootkit to the system loaded module at startup. And that will be over now for Snoopy. If we have a few more minutes, I would be happy to discuss the polls results maybe.
Yes, yes. Let's discuss poll results.
Yeah, this is displaying to me now. How do you mainly check your GNU Linux systems against rootkit and backdoors? This is pretty balanced, but the main answer is I will ask to continuous system logs and network traffic monitoring, which is a good thing, which is not enough, of course, but which is a good start. If we can, yeah, okay. Why do you think GNU Linux threats are globally less discussed by the cybersecurity community? They are not detected because security tools are rarely deployed on GNU Linux servers. I think that's right. I think that's a pretty good reason. The other one would be maybe a lowest interest. Did you know that you could craft UDP payloads with ZMAP, and more than 50% of our listeners did not? So I'm pretty happy that I could show you this trick. This is a very useful one that you can blindly rely on. Well, thanks for that. And I will try, maybe if we have time, to check for questions.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions right now.
Okay.
But
okay.
we will be returning for the AMA session, and then we have time then.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, yeah. And for those of you wondering, I'm like in my grandmother's backyard. So yeah, I'm in the nature, you know, as you might say. So thanks a lot, Pierre. Thanks for this presentation.
Thank you.
We will be moving to Mr. Boris. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hello Dan. Hello everyone.
Hello, hello. Yeah, Mr. Boris, you're gonna talk to us about EDAP plugins.
Yes, correct.
But I have a question for you before you start presenting. Meanwhile, if you can try to share your screen. And my question for you is, have you ever used the GHydra?
I'm actually not sure what it is.
Like the NSA tool, or how do you pronounce
okay.
GHydra, GHydra? It's like I
guess GHydra.
GHydra, yeah. I don't know, like.
Well, actually, I'm a huge fan of IDAPRO, so that's why my talk will be only about IDAPRO.
Okay, cool. So we can see your screen. GHydra. Okay, fine. We'll talk about this later. So please carry on.
So hello everyone. My name is Boris Larin. I'm a senior security researcher at Kaspersky GReAT team. And today I'm going to talk about IDAPRO. So at first, a few words about myself. I spent a lot of time working with IDAPRO. I analyze exploits to find 0 days. I analyze different code snippets to find sophisticated attacks. I analyze malicious techniques that abuse Windows operating system and different applications. And at my free time, I also like to analyze firmwares, find vulnerabilities. And for all of this, I use IDAPRO. So besides that, IDAPRO is our favorite team, our favorite tool of our team. And today I want to talk about plugins that I find really useful and personally use. And like no matter what you do, like malware analysis, vulnerability research, firmware analysis, or something else, I think that all these plugins, they will be really useful for you. And I will start this presentation with a plugin that I developed by myself to implement control flow transfer instructions highlighting. So during reverse engineering, I usually try to follow control flow basically I just do a quick look at different functions just as they execute, like to make general idea like what they do. And I do that from entry point of application or from some specific location. And it helps to lay out small pieces together in my head and like to make out the whole picture. But for this work, it's really important to not miss any important call instructions. And it's really easy to miss indirect function calls. So here is a comparison of different reverse engineering tools like Immunity Debugger, x46 Debugger, Radar tool, and IDPro. So as you can see, all of these tools, they highlight control flow transfer instructions like call and jumps. But IDPro doesn't do that. And by default, IDPro looks just plain. And it's possible to make things look just much more better if you go to color options. And here you can set different colors for instruction mnemonics, registers, variables, constants, and addresses. But it's not possible to configure different colors for different instructions. So it doesn't help to identify indirect function calls. And it seems that this issue bothered not only me, but also many others, because there exists a number of scripts aimed at this problem, like this two on this slide. And by the way, I will post all the links in the chat a little bit later. So all these scripts, they use two API functions like set color and set item color to set background color behind the instruction. And while it definitely does the job, I believe that the final result doesn't look that good as it was possible if it was possible to change the color of some particular instructions. And at some point, I decided to check if it's possible to change the color of some particular instructions with a more advanced plugin and dive into IDPro SDK. So I have found what I was looking for inside lines.hpp header file. And this file, it reveals the internal format that is used by IDPro to display the assembly text. So it turns out that IDPro outputs the assembly text lines among with special escape sequences that are used to implement syntax highlighting. And so here's a description of this format. It's very simple. At first, there is a single byte that indicates start of color text. Then there comes another byte that defines ID of a color. And after that comes text. And after that comes a sequence that defines the end of color text. And here I also provide a few IDs of different colors. And ID 5 it's the ID of instruction, of colored instruction. So besides that, IDPro also provides a way to install callbacks for different events. And one of such events is UI gen IDNOT text, which can be intercepted, and it can be used to provide your own custom text for IDA graph. So my idea was as follows: to make a callback for function function for UI gen IDNOT text notification, and then check if the assembly text line at current address starts with the following sequence. And if it's the case, then replace ID of color instruction with ID of some another color. And I quickly implemented this, and that's what I saw. So I was really happy when I saw it for the first time. My plan worked out pretty well, and I really missed this feature for quite a long time. But still, I was not fully satisfied yet, because the problem with such approach is that it's going to work only with x86 in the x64 assembly. But what about ARM, MIPS, and etc.? I need a CPU agnostic solution. So each processor module in IDPro has a special exported structure. It's called LPEH. And among different things, it contains a pointer to array of all instructions that are supported by processor module. And all instructions in this table, they are presented by instruction mnemonic and combination of its features. like what operand it modifies, or what operand it uses, does it hold execution, does it make a jump to another location, or does it cause another procedure? And this feature is exactly what we need. Like at start as plugin, we can parse list of all instructions from currently loaded processor model and find all instructions that have self call feature, and then use these instructions later in comparison. And that's what I got. So it's the final result. And you can get this, if you like it, you can get it by the following link. So let me know what you think about it, and I will be really glad to hear your feedback. And before I continue this presentation, let's have a quick poll. So yeah, you can choose among these options. And now I want to talk about identification of known functions. So identification of known functions, it's a huge reverse engineering problem. And most likely these two scenarios are quite familiar to you. So the first scenario is when you're reverse engineering binary without debug symbols. And this binary is statically linked with some known library. And you have symbols for this one. And you want automatically rename all functions from this library in your IDPro database. And another case is when you spend some time reverse engineering a binary without debug symbols, and then a new version of this binary comes up, and you want to transfer all your knowledge from your older database to a newer one. So to address the first issue was invented technology for storing and applying signatures for library functions identification, which is called FLIRT. You can read more information about this technology by the following link. But the general idea is that you can use special utility to preprocess object and library files. This utility produces a file that contains patterns of functions with names and also some additional information. And then you can use utility to convert this file to a signature file. And then you can put this signature file in a folder inside IDPro directory, and then apply it to your database from special window. But officially, this technology provides a way to create signature files only for libraries, so it cannot be used to transfer knowledge from one IDPro database to another. And after many years, this problem was finally addressed in IDPro 7.2. And this release, it introduced technology that is called Lumina Server. So with this technology, you can push and retrieve metadata about functions, like names, comments, to server. And the problem with this approach is that currently only public Lumina servers is available. So all information that you will put into this server, it will become public. And sometimes you need to keep things private. So still, like, I believe the best way to transfer knowledge from one IDPro database to another is to use plugins. And thankfully, as such plugins, they exist for ages. Like these two very old plugins, IDA2PAT and IDB2SIG, they share the same idea and can be used to generate third signature file from existing IDPro database, and then apply it to a new database just as if it was a signature for a library. But like original IDA2PAT and IDB2SIG plugins, they're not maintained. So, but it's still possible to find fork for IDPro 7. And there even exists a more modern version that was written in IDA Python. But the downside of FLIRT technology is that it only works with when signature closely matches bytes of function body. And it could be a problem when like you compile a library from source code and the result doesn't really match with functions in your binary, but still it's the same library. And here binary diff and differ plugins comes really handy because they not only can be used to compare functions in different binaries, but there is also very useful and I believe a little bit overlooked feature that can help you to automatically support all the symbols between two IDPro databases. With Decipher, it's really easy. You just go to the matches window, select a few functions, do a right click and press import selected. And those names and comments from one IDPro database will be transferred to another. I find it really useful. And I also recommend you to give a try to Carta. It's a really cool plugin. It was released not that long ago, and you can read about it more by the following link. The general idea is that this plugin is created especially for the identification of known functions in binary directly from source code. So I recommend you to check it out. And now I want to talk about something that I find really useful, which is using Yara within IDPro. So probably you know, Yara is a pattern matching Swiss knife. It's probably the most beloved tool of all malware analysts. And I believe it's still massively underrated by everyone else. But pattern matching, it can be really useful in reverse engineering. You can search for important constants, magic values, GUIDs. And then when match is found, you can print a message, rename an address, or leave a comment at right address. And so the key here is to know what you can look for and how it can improve your workflow. For example, the plugin ThinkCrypt Yara uses Yara to look for common cryptographic constants. And this is how you can use Yara within IDPro by yourself. It's fairly easy. You just need to have Yara Python package installed, and then you can use the following script. I find it really useful, like every time when I open new file in IDPro, I just have a really huge file with different signatures, and I find it really useful to like execute it every time when I load new file in IDPro. And the last thing that I want to talk about today is functional relationships. So having a map of all relationships between functions, it might be quite useful during reverse engineering. But if you work with huge file, the functions, IDPro functions, xrefs graph2 and xrefs graphs_from, they might produce not really useful results, like this one example on this slide. So you can see it's just a mess, and it's not possible to understand any relationships there. And I believe that IDPro developers were aware of this problem. They tried to address it with proximity view. It's a feature that was implemented a while ago. So with this feature, initially you have only a few nodes in view, but you can add more as you progress. And it's even possible to find the path between multiple functions. You can add a function by its name or address, and then just press right click and find path. But for me, this feature still feels like it's under development. It doesn't feel like its proximity view was finished, more like a proof of concept. And I personally like to use another plugin, which is called rootkit. I use it for the same purpose, to find the path between multiple functions. So yeah, it builds interactive flow graph, and it also highlights basic blocks, and it's fully scriptable. So here's comparison of proximity view and rootkit. And I believe that rootkit produces, like, output of rootkit looks better. And there are also a few honorable mentions. Unfortunately, I don't really have time to talk about all of them, but all of them are awesome, and I recommend you to give them a shot. So, conclusions, like, there are too many awesome IDPro plugins, and it's simply not possible to talk about all of them. I just mentioned plugins that I personally use, and like plugins that can be used by like whatever reverse engineering work you're doing. But there are much more plugins with more specific goals, and you can discover them by yourself with the following links. And so here are links for the plugins. I will post them in the chat. And also, please stay tuned. we are going to open source more awesome plugins in the future. And here's the results of the poll. Most of the people use less than 3 plugins. And I hope that more of you will use more plugins after my presentation. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I will be glad to answer your questions right now if you have time or during our session. And also I will be glad to hear about your favorite plugins. So thank you.
So thanks a lot, Mr. Boris. Well, I think we have time for one question now, and then the rest of them for our AMA session. And I would say, Ivan is asking, are there any major differences between diaphora and bindiff? Which one would you recommend?
There is some major differences between diaphora and bindiff. Like diaphora, it's fully written in Python. So in case if you have Python, it's really handy to use. With bindiff, you need to have a Java on your machine. Well, I will say that both plugins are awesome. They have different algorithms to compare functions. So sometimes, well, I recommend you to have both of them and see which one does a better job for you. Usually I prefer to, at first I use diaphora and like the result is satisfying, I just use it. Sometimes I have to use bindiff.
Okay, so thanks a lot. I think that's all the time that we have to answer questions now, but we'll see you shortly after our last talk. So yeah, thanks a lot, Mr. Boris. And I would like to invite Mr. Fabio and Mr. Dima, coming all the way from Latin America.
Thank you very much, Dani.
How are you? Buenos días.
Sí, buenos días. Everything's good. Thank you.
Hello, hello everybody.
Hello, Fabio. We can hear you. Yeah. So, guys, let's start.
Okay.
Also, indeed, a nice blue sky in Miami. Yeah. not like here, where I think it's gonna start raining soon. So, like.
I see.
We can see your presentation.
Okay, so thank you for staying with us. By the end of the presentation, we're gonna have our polls. And as for now, we would like to speak with you about COVID-19 cyber threats. But when we think about COVID-19, we just can't skip thinking and talking about what just happened to Twitter last week. You remember, it was such a nice evening here everywhere in Latin America and also in the US. And immediately we just put those prominent accounts started tweeting, like from even Twitter support, Apple, you know, all those people. So it was very unusual. Actually, that was the first time we saw something like that, right? So we immediately, Fabinho and myself, started digging to see what's going on. And of course, as you can see here on these slides, on the one hand, they promoted one Bitcoin wallet, which starts with BC1, and also one domain called cryptoforhealth.com. So for us was the question, is that, I mean, everything what they have, like all that hack is about these two things only? And yes, the website itself was like this, you see cryptoforhealth.com, while the whole purpose was about appealing to the greediness of people. Basically, you send one Bitcoin and you get 5, right? So funny. So when we checked the source code of the website, it was clear it was just scam. Why? Because of that random function, math function, which shows that, you know, like funny bars, when you go to the website and each time you press F5, it shows you like, you know, the bar is basically like dancing from left to right, like more people or less people, you know, just contributed with the Bitcoins. So it was clear, it was, you know, it was scam. It was just like, you know, trying to catch as many as they can, you know, in terms of Bitcoins. And of course the wallet with that magic word, window.wallet. But the question was, is there anything else or just that? So in the when it started, we saw like immediately about 355 transactions with the wallet, and then next day it was 377, and today it's like 390 something, with a total of about $120,000. And many people actually was surprising, like, really, you know, hacking Twitter and making 120,000 only, just it's a joke. So for us was the same question. This is it? I mean, this is it? Like, you want to burn your name in such a great access, or what's going on?
Okay, in this situation, we realized that it was not a COVID-19 giveaway, but yet another scam. So what you do in this case is you go blocking it in all your products to protect all your customers using and trusting your products. And actually we did it. Well, but our very good research go beyond. I mean, it's not normal for a cyber criminal to rely on only one malicious domain. And starting with this only one, crypto4health.com, we found 200 more, and how we did it. And that's the point of this presentation that we want to highlight to you. Some very useful and good tools that we have and we use to find cyber badness, especially when you want to look or you're hunting for malicious things and you are planning a very good content filtering. Well, a very good tool that I think most of the industry are using are the VirusTotal graphic tool. There you have a very cool feature called the reverse IP. There you can see, and now you can listen to my dog, I'm sorry. You can find on VirusTotal the very cool feature that you can take a look at the server, and the same sites hosted at the same server. And this is quite cool because all the cyber criminals, they put their eggs at the same basket. And other very cool feature and tool is the domain tools. In the whois feature, you can see the server and you can take a look. And there, my friends, you will find a lot of badness hosted together. And it's a very good start point where you can take a look at these other websites you can find.
So this is how we ended up first with a list of, you can see here on the screenshot, 273 lines or domains. But of course, when you work with bulk data, you have broken lines, repeated domains. Some of those are not actually malicious. So after, like sorting out, we got about 200 unique domains connected to the same network cluster, which was used in the attack on Twitter. So it was very nice because you see, initially we just had one domain, but eventually we got 200 and we just shoot them all. It's it feels good that just because you can block those things. Maybe they are like happening in parallel, or maybe they're going to be used just in a few minutes, hours, and so on. But we proactively block them all because they belong to the same network cluster abused by those people behind that. Another thing is also very interesting we use for our hunting. It's some of the, not all, some of the servers, they also used let's encrypt certificates, right? And you can see here one of them, it's for the website called gatesgive.net. So yes, Bill Gates giving, money, Bitcoins, and blah, blah, blah. So also using that data, like in this case, you can see the certificate was issued on July 1st. We can also use some threat hunting magic and find more stuff. And this is how we found different websites already, ready to use as the one we saw in the beginning, like Crypto for Health. We found more stuff. Like you see here, this one is for Jack Dorsey, the CIO of Twitter. Sorry for them. He even had to go to public, to apologize for the hack. But here's a website also using his name and using a different Bitcoin wallet. This gentleman, his name is Thomas Lee. He doesn't have any verified account. By the way, speaking about verified account, when it was happening, I felt like desperate, you know, I wanted to tweet it because of that. We were just investigating live, like, you know, like having evidences and blocking that, but my account was prevented from tweeting. So I just sat down, I made screenshot, and that's it. So this gentleman, Thomas Lee, he doesn't have any verified account, but he's been very active discussing COVID-19 stuff, graphics, statistics, and so on. So they also made a fake website on his name, same people behind the, you know, that network cluster with same stuff. You like Linux? You see my friend Pierre, he likes Linux, okay? So Linus Torvald also has his own website, also with his Bitcoin. Of course, Mr. Musk, Elon, he's the champion, you know, they have tons of the website on his name. This particular campaign you can see here was also designed to run on Telegram. This is very interesting. So it's not only Twitter, but also through Telegram. And of course, you see 50,000 Bitcoins. And this guy, maybe you know him, Vitalik Buterin. He's the guy who invented Ethereum, also basically giving away his Ethereums and blah, blah, blah. So the transactions were not in Bitcoins, but in Ethereums. So this gentleman, he's a chairman from Virgin Atlantic. His name is Chamath, I think. This is his first name, and same stuff. So a lot of work, you know, it's not only one single hack, just like isolated to Twitter with $120,000. So at first sight, I mean, that same day, that same moment, we were able to identify 7 different wallets, you can see here, which belong to different people, right? And the question was, okay, how much money did they make? And not much. Like about $153,700, still like very low. You see the main wallet BC1, which that is one which made like 120,000, right? But the rest, you see, it's not that much. So like really going and crazy and hacking Twitter, like making a mess, you know, like doing like such a big stuff, you know, burning your access even like to Twitter. It's just, and bringing all the law enforcement agencies over you, it's like, you gotta be, you know, really dumb if you do so. So this was our question, like, is there anything else in behind? So we just wrote a simple Yara rule, you can see here, with typical strings, which are in the code, I mean HTML code. We saw and we ran it on VirusTotal, and we got a total of 214 new websites, HTML files, which was scrapped from the websites, and someone uploaded them to VirusTotal. And the interesting thing was this is from yesterday. I just picked alphabetically first 20, I mean 10%, first 20 wallets files, you can see here, and I extracted wallets from those files, from those matches from VirusTotal. And those are the transactions you can see here. Some are really like poor. You see $1.59, nothing. But others like 87,000 and so on. So a little bit of math, and we can see that between these 10, between these 20, I'm sorry, wallets, these guys moved about $200,000, right? So it's about 10,000 per wallet when we speak about their, like more or less an average profit. And if we multiply those 20 by 10, because it was 10%, we might be speaking about like potential profit of like 2 million. It sounds better, right? So you can see like very simple things. I mean, just like building, you know, setting up like fake websites and saying, appealing to the greediness of people and such, really like can bring like potentially for those guys like millions of dollars. And here, of course, what we are showing, it's a potential profit, but still that is real. It comes from VirusTotal, and has some limitations. What are those limitations in our threat hunting? First, you know, VirusTotal time. I think it's like 90 days. I don't remember exactly what they allow you to, you know, to hunt to the past. And second, of course, not everybody is grabbing the HTML code and uploading it to the network. I mean, to VirusTotal. And another interesting thing just to mention about those wallets. So we have seen also in some codes that only few, they also use obfuscation, JavaScript obfuscation in the code. I was thinking why, because it's not malicious. When I saw it, I was like, man, that should be malware, but no, no malware there. Probably they saw that some of the vendors, I don't know, started like detecting or using, I don't know, Yara like us, you know, just blocking those accesses on the network layer. So they just use JavaScript obfuscation to, you know, to make it like harder to detect those websites. And yeah, the question is it phishing? Yes, no, to detect it and such. But you can see here with such a small cut, different, like absolutely different files, you can see the potential profit of those people behind those attacks with, you know, like send me 1 Bitcoin and we will give you 5 more. Fabinho?
Yeah, we're living in very interesting times that everybody are being targeted by attacks using the pandemic as a main topic, including the World Health Organization. They reported their cyber attacks against their infrastructure up 5-fold increase, and this is important. And the days we are living are also interesting. The pandemic are slowing the internet worldwide in a lot of countries. PC shipments are increasing a lot because everybody's working from home. And of course, as a result, we are seeing a lot of RDP, brute force attacks worldwide, mainly by the cyber criminals behind ransomware attacks. And also a lot of attacks directed against home users, and using all possible platforms to deliver such attacks using the pandemic as a bait. We saw a lot of things on WhatsApp, and this was very interesting. We found an attack exploiting the CVE 2019-18426 that changed the link that it's you see in the message. It was very interesting attacks, and a lot of them directed against everybody. I mean, everybody are being targeted these days, including home and final users. Dima.
Something interesting was, you know, people, especially at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's they just stay home, and most of them, they use cell phones. Some didn't have even a laptop, and they were sent to work from home, remote work. So yes, WhatsApp and everything was mobile, basically. So we also, unfortunately, saw campaigns, and we blocked them. When they, the threat actors behind it appeal to people's need, you know, no job, just, you know, layoff, no money, no food, and they spread those campaigns saying like, okay, there is a voucher, you know, like free meal, just go and pick it up from the store. It was like, I mean, crazy bad. It was not about cybercrime for me, because you know, they went to those stores, actually. They went to claim those vouchers, and they got infected, and they infected other people. That was really bad. So we blocked really much, and we ran campaigns also on Twitter, helping people to block that and to help the communities to stay healthy.
Yeah, in a lot of malicious websites, a lot of campaigns using all the topics possible to trick users, offering fake giveaways, early access to government benefits regarding the pandemic, free hand sanitizers and masks, and so on. A lot of malicious campaigns. So what the security industry does in this case? Well, we start to put our engines to work and to collect a lot of these malicious domains. And we saw in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people putting these blacklists available to everybody as a way to protect infrastructures. And this was quite cool, but don't hurry. We saw in these blacklists a lot of false positives, And some of these blacklists, the quality was really bad. So we started to think how to really offer a very good blacklist with content filtering, but doing it in the right way. I mean, offering a very good content filtering with bad content without or with less false positives. And we can see here in this example, all these websites, they are in a blacklist, but they are clean, including government websites. And who put this website there don't know that GUB, gobierno in Spanish, are websites related to the government as well. So in this case, you need to prepare better blacklists. And of course, you have a lot of tools and features you can use it. And I want to share some of them with you. To find fresh domains, you can use dailychanges.com. This is open and free to everybody. You can download it and you can use it to build a very good blacklist, to do a very good content filtering. And we are suggesting these tools because they are free, they are open, so everybody can use it. Because most of the times people are complaining, you're always using tools that are expensive, or it's closed to some only secret companies. And that's why we are suggesting these tools as well. They are very good. And a lot of typos domains also use it in this attack. And in this case, we suggest to use Levenstein distance with this very cool and free tool called Harry. You can use it as well. And as Dimitri said in the beginning, you can also take a look in this digital certificates issued by everybody. The Certificate Transparency Initiative is very cool. And you can see all the certs issued worldwide by all the companies that issue digital certificates. You can find a lot of badness there, and you can increase your blacklist and your content filtering. Okay, jumping into conclusions. You have some polls, some questions to answer, and we will read it in the end. Some points that I want to highlight. Don't ignore the WHOIS database. Some data are still there. We know that GDPR was a problem for the WHOIS database. And a lot of researchers felt the problem of do not having personal data of bad guys registering malicious domains, but some data are still there and is still useful, especially the historic data. And actually, GDPR is not your enemy if you have a good PDNS database. So if you are not using it yet, we really suggest it to you. And some tips to avoid false positives: look at the name server and try to think in other languages, because not all the government domains are .gov. There are a lot of other ways that governments around the world are registering their domains. You can see some of them on the screen. If you find one domain, consider using the Levenstein distance to find typos. This is a very good trick to find badness. Look at the digital certificates, SSL certificates, in the certificate transparency. Reverse IP lookup, it's something very good to look as well. And if you are doing keyword domain hunting, try to think in other languages as well, because if you try to filter some keywords as COVID or pandemic, you'll find much more using other languages. And keywords related to the pandemic as well, such as auxílio or benefício in Portuguese or in Spanish, you'll find a lot of badness as well, and you can increase the effectiveness of a blacklist to do a very good content filtering. And that's it.
So in essence, it requires, of course, to have tools, to have abilities, and also language skills. Why? Because if you want to protect not only English-speaking countries, but also others, you definitely need people who speak those languages as well. Because as we said, you remember remote work, for example, in Spanish is teletrabajo, doesn't have to do anything with remote work. If you hunt for remote work in Latin America, you won't be probably finding much. But with stuff like teletrabajo, you will find a lot. And imagine, same as for other languages like Russian and others. So this is it from our side. I don't know if we can see the results of the, oh yeah, it's here. So how important is, I just rely on my security providers, okay? and synchronous cell OSINT versus commercial. 50-50, not bad. And GDPR is bad. Okay, yes. Thank you very much for attending our presentation.
Thanks a lot, guys. I think I really enjoyed your presentation. Unfortunately, I had to move inside, mostly because it started raining. So yeah, such is life. I would like to thank everybody for the presentations. We finished the first part of our session, and basically the idea is that we want to have an AMA session now. Yeah, somebody is coming for me. We want to have an AMA session now, and we have like questions ready. But before that, I would like to announce that we will be launching a Yara training. So for those of you who participated in our Yara training back during our SAS offline SAS events, or we did also private Yara trainings. Now it's online. We worked, like my colleagues worked quite for a long time to make it available online, and it's gonna be available on one of these like websites where you can have online courses. I don't know exactly where. Kostin is the one who is gonna be your teacher. And please check it out. We will announce it pretty soon on our channels. And feel free to take it. It's gonna be most of the content same as the like offline one, but you know, like actually we have Kostin here to actually tell you about it. So we're gonna talk a little bit later about this one. I would like to invite everybody, all the speakers, to turn on their webcams, and we're gonna move to our AMA session. And I have a first question for Mr. Dima and Mr. Fabio. And the question for you, gentlemen, is, let me look it up, 1 second. Yes. Have you noticed any new trends in cyber threats now that we are in lockdown?
Yes, yes. Especially we have seen like an increase of targeted ransomware. Yeah. This is, it's not about like ransomware, you know, targeting homemade pictures, but targeting corporations. Why? Because what literally happened in many countries, not in all, but still, they were against having people at home, working from home, because they believed like it was a kind of, you know, people would be, I don't know, relaxing and drinking beer. But then eventually by law, they had to send all people home, and they didn't have enough machines even. So what they did, they just went to grab any laptops from the retail stores, you know, renting places and so on. And what about the infrastructure? Like network infrastructure, was it ready to be, you know, like to work remotely? Come on. So they enabled like very silly remote accesses like RDP, you know, all of those just to make people to connect to the, and that's it. And what they got is like a huge number of attacks by those targeted ransomware groups. And now this is something which is like happening every day. You see even like big telcos are infected. Fabinho?
Yeah, I also think the double ransom is here to stay. I mean, if the company don't want to pay to decrypt the files, the company need to pay to keep these files private. And most of the times, cybercriminals are leaking these files. And of course, this is a big problem when you have GDPR, LGPD, that is the Brazilian version of GDPR. And other countries are hurrying up to approve data protection laws as well. That's why I think this double ransom things against corporations and government as well are here to stay, unfortunately, in this time of pandemic.
Okay, thanks a lot. Also, I would like to continue this discussion about, have you seen, there's a question about open RDP servers. Did you see like a lot more RDP servers being publicly available, opened on the internet?
Is that to us also?
Yeah, to you.
Mm-hmm.
We have published a few like things on secure list about that, attacks on RDP, and yes, there is a clear increase in that. Definitely it's natural, as we said, because you know, what else? I mean, like if you don't have money budget to invest and you just you have to work, basically they enable RDP and that's it. This is why, according to Kaspersky statistics, we register. I mean, that is not like we believe. I mean, we saw it happen. The number of attacks through RDP increased a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
the remote workforce, it was like not planned. So that's why a lot of companies are doing the remote work incorrectly or putting everybody on RDP, and you need to plan to do it securely. But unfortunately, a lot of companies are not doing it. That's why we saw a lot of RDP brute force attacks worldwide.
Okay, thanks a lot. Next question is for Mr. Pierre. I don't know if you can hear us. Hello?
I can hear you, Dan.
Hey, hello.
Of course I can.
So somebody is asking if you have any tips for debugging a Linux kernel module you suspect is malicious or bad, as in tools used, techniques, what can be done?
That's an interesting question. Actually, this will be a pain in any case, and I don't have magic tricks. But the common thing to do is to run the kernel image with the module you want to debug on a VM and run a GDB server. Then connect to this GDB server through, for instance, IDEA, so that you can follow the debug. But on the case I presented, the Snoopy backdoor and so on, most of the time the kernel module will at some point interact with userland, and you can start a static analysis from the kernel module, then guess what will be the userland part that interact with the kernel module, and focus on the userland part in order to deduce the kernel module parts you could not find from static analysis. On this specific case, I mainly analyzed the debugged the backdoor, the userland backdoor, and I only statically read the kernel module, and it was enough to guess the whole logic.
Is it a good practice to debug like kernel modules on a virtual machine or on a hardware machine?
Well, I did not find a case where you would have to run on hardware specifically. Most of the time VM are in-house. But of course, if the kernel module is targeting a specific device or controller or anything that is hardware related, you would have to take real hardware and hook it into an analysis network.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, for Mr. Boris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Boris, somebody is asking if you have any experience with exporting IDA information to debuggers.
Well, I know there exists a number of plugins for doing that. I can share with you more links. I will post them in the chat in a few minutes. Okay.
So you can send them. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, we move on to Mr. Kostin. Can you hear us?
Hey, Mr. Dan. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
And, welcome and thanks for joining our AMA session. there are some questions that popped up, and I think you might know the answers for those ones. They're about our product, Kaspersky GReAT attribution engine. But I think the most interesting question, and the one that I would like to ask you first, is what are the most interesting pieces of malware, or the most interesting piece of malware that basically GReAT has analyzed this year?
This year, so for sure, WellMess that Brian talked about is quite interesting because it was vastly unattributed, and at the same time was used in what we can say high-profile incidents. In particular, I think Brian also talked about one victim, which used to be some kind of a magnet of threats, always seeing very high-end threat actors hitting them. And they also got hit with WellMess, so that's another, let's say, proof that it's a really interesting threat actor behind it. And another one that I can talk about, because there's a lot of interesting malware, like I can't talk about one, I can't talk about two, I can't talk about three, and so on. But the ones that we can talk about and is very, very interesting is, I guess, malware called, we call it Magic Scroll, and other people call it acid box. That's definitely perhaps the most interesting that we have seen this year. So check out, there's a very cool blog post about acid box from our colleagues at Palo Alto. So take a look. That's also very, very interesting stuff.
Okay, thanks. The next two questions are about our threat attribution engine.
Can I chime in, Dan?
Yeah. Oh, sure, please.
Yeah, sure.
You skipped me.
I'm sorry, man. I forgot. Then. So.
No. Costa mentioned those two, which is great. But you know, we published something earlier this year that I don't think got a lot of attention, and it should have. And if anybody's listening that likes to dig into very interesting APTs, I would look at wild pressure. That was of particularly interesting, that was a neat investigation that the folks did here, specifically around the targets where it was found. Some of the things that were done in the malware, it would be really neat to see some other folks dive into that and take a look. Would be very curious to see what others see, or if there's any sort of attribution behind that, because that was another one that was very difficult. But yeah, that one and the light spy stuff that First did, the iOS exploit chain, that was pretty interesting as well. An actor we called Two Sail Junk, just the fact that they had a full exploit chain available, mobile implants targeting a very specific set of individuals. That was pretty interesting as well. So just wanted to add those to it.
Kostin posted the link to our wild pressure blog post.
Yeah.
And
Juan, go take a look at wild pressure, Juan.
Juan said Milum, which I don't understand exactly, but sure, whatever. Okay, cool. So
I like the fact that Juan is always looking for some paleontology related findings that he can dig deeper.
Exactly, man. We have like special special info for people who are looking into this stuff.
So, by the way, while it is a good idea to check Juan's site, which has a pretty epic name, which is epicturla.com.
So, meanwhile, Kostin, can you tell us more about KTAE?
KTAE, yeah, sure.
KTAE.
So, the question was more about the availability, or what KTAE is,
we have two
where
questions.
we can get it. Okay.
We have two questions. Can you explain more about what KTAE is? Where can we get it? And secondly, if there is a way for individual researchers to get access to KTAE.
All right. So in short, KTAE is the Kaspersky Threat Attribution Engine, which in essence is a code similarity solution. You feed it with samples, and then it gives you reports about what those samples are similar to. And the other things, they can be similar. Other malware from known threat actors, that includes both APTs and crimeware, exploits, delivery documents, and so on and so on. So there's actually a blog that I wrote about KTAE and how we came up with this tool, with this idea. I'm gonna share the link to secure list for that as well. In terms of how to get access, this is an enterprise solution that was designed from scratch to operate in air-gapped networks. So because of that, it needs to be installed on your premise and work. It is actually designed to work without any kind of connection to the internet, and it does have a huge database behind it, and that database includes whitelisting. It includes all our knowledge about pretty much every threat actor that we ever researched. So there's a pretty huge database behind KTAE that needs to be deployed as well. However, the reason for having it air-gapped is because in general, people want to check very sensitive samples, so they're not okay with the idea of uploading these samples anywhere else. However, we're also working on the possibility to have it deployed in your private cloud, and that will kind of simplify the access, I believe. So for now, if you're really interested, we can organize a POC, proof of concept. If you're an enterprise and you're interested in KTAE, drop us an email. You can contact us at intelreports@kaspersky.com, and we'll get back to you with more information on how to deploy KTAE for a POC.
Okay, thanks a lot. We have a question, follow-up question, still about KTAE for Mr. Ariel. Are you here? Hello?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself.
Yeah, hello. So in your presentation, you showed VirusTotal similarity engine. Also, you showed our KTAE similarity engine. So Eduardo is asking if there are any options, other options similar to KTAE.
The thing is that what KTAE does is it gives.
Or why is it our why is it our like solution better than the other options?
So again, the thing about KTAE is that it takes a look at genotypes, which are again pieces of codes, and it has this huge database of everything that we ever looked at, pretty much, together with clean samples. So we know also which genotypes are not interesting. It can give you answer about the attribution, the possible attribution of the sample to an APT actor. And it can give you similar samples from this threat actor. And it can also tell you exactly which genotypes were matching, and also information about matching strings. I personally don't know about any other solution that is out there. And I can tell you from my experience, working in the past in other companies, it was always a pain to identify samples. So I think it's quite a unique solution. And given the huge data set that we have in Kaspersky, it's quite powerful. We've been internally for like 2-3 years now, and we just recently actually made it into a product that we can deploy.
Yeah, this is also what I wanted to point out, is that we worked so hard, and well, I didn't work specifically on this technology, but my colleagues did, and it's like quite a big project. It's a cooperation between more departments within our R&D division. And I think since we've been using it for like 3 years, as you said, and we are only now releasing it to the public because we wanted to make sure that it's as good as possible. It's like one of the best systems from my point of view. And I think it does it attribution, like doing attribution, doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, if you automate it well enough, you can get a feed of your interesting APT samples straight into your inbox every day. I mean,
Yeah.
And if I may provide a very quick comment, there's actually a message from Nick saying that Intezer is sort of comparable to KT, and absolutely, Intezer, and we have some very great people working there, good friends of ours. Intezer has an amazing code similarity technology as well, and I guess there's differences and similarities between Intezer and KTAE, and both have advantages or disadvantages. It really, I think it comes down to what you need. The on-premise, air-gapped, I would say maybe ability to connect to threat actors which have not been disclosed publicly, whitelisting capabilities. So there's a lot of differences, but absolutely Intezer is also an amazing solution, and I've always said they have great technology.
Do we know what is the size of the database?
In KTAE?
Yeah.
Well, the database in KTAE is pretty large, it's several terabytes in size, and that includes only information about genotypes and hashes. So there's no samples in there. So imagine there's several terabytes of fragments of code used by both samples from threat actors and clean files.
Okay. Okay. Then we're gonna move to a question from Abdullah, which is that one victim described as magnet of threats is okay to mention, not to mention who it is, but could you please say, if you can, what industry is a magnet threat victim is at? I think Mr. Brian wanted to answer this question.
Yeah, sure. We obviously can't talk about the country or who it is in particular, but I would say as a general vertical, aviation industry, development of aviation technologies, something along that line. So not healthcare related, but also fairly important if you were to talk about espionage activities. So.
Yeah, I guess there's a point that you also made, Brian, which is that WellMess is not just about COVID-19 and healthcare. We're seeing a lot of other industries getting targeted. So if you're, let's say, not in healthcare, don't think that WellMess won't go after you.
Yeah.
They have a much wider targeting.
Yeah, the telco stuff was really interesting to me. Whenever we see telcos targeted, that's a pretty interesting target just because of the visibility and the capabilities once they're into some place like that, what an actor can do once they gain access to something, you know, a company that has, say, handles all of the country's internet communications. The general contracting companies that I mentioned are the types of contracting companies that potentially provide services to governments along the lines of engineering, aviation, medical device development, things like that. So these are the big contractors. If I were to equate it to someone that maybe most folks understand, I'm not saying they got hit, but something along the lines of, say, General Dynamics or a Lockheed or something like that, but elsewhere.
Yeah, I think maybe Dan froze for a moment, but looking at some of the other questions, it's an interesting one that maybe I would like to answer to Jima. Jima, who do you think is winning the cyber race, the bad guys or the good guys?
Yeah, well, you know, this race, I think it's unlimited. There's no chance to win it. And basically, there's no room to lose it. We just have to stay here and to fight it. Because as long as they have their motivations, we'll have to fight it. And unfortunately, yes, first they should attack, and then we'll have to, you know, to do something. And we will be here. We will work on that. This is for sure.
Thank you, Jima. and the question for Pierre, if I may, from Walid. Walid is asking about Linux rootkits. And by the way, I think that Linux rootkits are a very, very interesting species to look at. And Walid is asking about the current generation of EDR systems. Are they useless? Are they effective against Linux rootkits? And by the way, another Linux rootkit that we have seen recently, I think, was deployed with and all these supercomputing attacks that we talked about maybe 1.5 months ago, 2 months ago. The attackers would also deploy user mode Linux rootkits in that case. But just to cut the story short, what do you think, Pierre? Are the current next generation EDR systems useful, effective, or useless?
Well, I actually did not tested them, so I couldn't really say, but the general thing is that you have to apply the same endpoint protection strategies that for other hosts and computers. And I think the main issue we have right now is that we do not apply in-house endpoint protection measures on Linux systems. And nonetheless, they support a lot of infrastructures nowadays, including containers or virtual machines and so on. And we tend to forget the underlying Linux system. So the same endpoint protection that other system would be at least an endpoint scanning service. So maybe even an open source file scanning or Yara scanner would be enough to start. And I wouldn't say that EDR is better or is not good or anything, but something is definitely needed to scan the system for malicious binaries. And there are plenty of open sources tools to do that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Dan, welcome back. You dropped for a moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a problem with my laptop. So I have
Are you
another...
running Linux by any chance? You check for rootkits?
I refuse to say. I refuse to say that.
Very good answer.
I would like to ask an open question, like what do you guys think about the latest Gartner 3D cube?
Well, I think we need to go to the next dimension and straight into that. So we have it like 6 dimensions, and then we'll be covered.
Exactly. Only if we get to the 6th dimension, then we are like covered and we can fully be protected. Unfortunately, on this Zoom app on my phone, I don't see the questions, or maybe there are.
Well, there's another interesting question, if I may. I would like to actually ask Brian. There's a DNS wormable bug in Microsoft Windows, a nasty critical 10.0 severity. And do you know if any APT groups or otherwise are exploiting this bug, Brian, at the moment, or if there's any exploitation at all for this? What do you know?
No, I mean, technically I was trying to avoid that question because honestly, no, it's good. It put me on the spot. Thanks, Kostin.
Cheers, man.
Yeah, I don't have any info to suggest that somebody is using it or it's being used by someone, or who's used it in the past. To be quite honest, the data that we have really doesn't show us a big enough picture to understand from what I've seen. It's obviously something folks can dig into, and hopefully there's some more data shared around the industry right now to kind of look into it a little more, but it's definitely something that, should be investigated. I just have not been able to see any indications of anyone really using it right now, at least on my end. So. Yeah,
I haven't seen any either. Although, as as we probably have seen in past cases, it takes a while for people to develop exploits for 0 days, 1 days, 2 days, and so on. And when those are developed, things might get nasty, such as we have seen the case with WannaCry, NotPetya, Expector, and so on.
I think there's like a possibility that we might see, as you said, like in 1 year, like a epidemic, might say, like with infected unpatched DNS servers. Okay, so I also have a question for you, Mr. Kostin. People asked, and there was a lot of chat about Yara training. So you were the main trainer in the Yara training. Can you tell us more about this training?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I posted the link in chat, and the link is xtraining.kaspersky.com. This is the online version of our famous Hunt APTs with Yara, like GReAT Ninja. We've done this for some time already. I think the first time we've done it was the SAS Security Analyst Summit, and then traditionally, we've been doing this training during SAS. But with the current situation with COVID, work from home, online learning, we thought that it would be helpful for many people to have this available as an online training. And to be honest, this is what I have been doing for the past 6 weeks or so. In the office, filming with the green screen behind me, and trying to record every single exercise that we have in our Yara training with very cool choices and answers. And I'm grateful to my colleagues Vitaly Kamliuk and Yuri Namestnikov, who also helped putting together this online training. So I can tell you that one of the big challenges is how do you make a training that is very interactive. So there's usually a lot of discussion between participants. A lot, we ask for their opinion, and the challenge was how do you take that interactivity and how do you make it online. But I do think that we've succeeded. The Yara training is complemented by a virtual lab. So you log in into the virtual lab and you can run tools in there. You can access Clara, our in the cloud threat hunting system that uses Yara. So it's all very cool. I'm very excited about this being made available. And we're hoping, of course, to make a few others available as well. Just again, the link is xtraining.kaspersky.com. And I see that Brian is asking what's the background? What is my background? That's an interesting background that I found, which represents two characters. If you're familiar with the American Gods saga, we have there here is a guy called Chernobog, the black god. Here we have the guy called Belobog, the white god, and they're like always fighting each other, which is a way of depicting the fight between bad and good. If I remember correctly, actually, in Neil Gaiman's books, Chernobog is a good guy, Belobog is depicted as being the bad guy. But I thought that the fight between the evil and good is very representative for what we are doing nowadays. And that's why I liked the background.
And I think like Juan is asking if those are the Lamberts.
I don't think so, because the Lamberts wouldn't be fighting each other, right?
Exactly.
Again, it's just Russian mythology.
So we have another question. Thanks, Kostin. We have another question from Mr. I need to click on this one. Mr. Walid. I hope I pronounced your name right. So your question is, what kind of trend do you guys see in terms of data breaches? Are they still increasing and prevalent? Now, who wants to answer this? Like, it's an open question. Hello?
Yeah, I hear you. I'll throw my name in the hat.
Okay.
This year, I don't really have anything to speak on like trends right now. I think if I were to predict in the future how data breaches are going to come into play. I think we're going to see more and more, for instance, we talk about targeted ransomware type things, or data breaches as a potential espionage related incident, or maybe some false flag things as far as maybe pointing fingers at other actors. There's some things that happened last year, which is pretty interesting. And maybe in the future, breaches per se are not going to be as much for compiling massive amounts of user data, but maybe holding companies hostage or using it to further certain political agendas or games. Just a thought.
I would also like to add about ransomware. Yes, again, these guys, it's always about actually data, leaking, because it's not about ransomware itself, because they just need to steal it and to tell, like, I have your data. And then it starts about the, ransomware. And one interesting thing, we have seen at least 2 ransomware groups implemented something called like public auctions. That means like, okay, I got your data, you refuse to pay, don't worry, I'm gonna put it for sale. And anyone who pays for it, like there is a blitz price, you just, you take it. And this is something for me kind of worrying, because also it's a very good source right now, potential source for intelligence agencies. They can just get that information as well, just buying that. And additionally, when we think about ransomware attacks on telcos, right? It's always about data leakage, because telcos, this is what they have: a customer's data. This is what they have. What else they have? And we just saw, like recently, I mean, it was this week, an attack, like a huge attack on a telco in Argentina. 2 weeks ago, or so 3 weeks ago, I think it was a big attack also on another telco in Chile. So it's this thing is like, it's a mess now between cybercrime. It depends like who's behind that. I mean, what is the motivation? But cybercrime will just target it hard and put it on sale and trading, or just in the end, if the ransom not paid, okay, you got it, it goes public. So it's a big, big problem.
Okay. Thanks, Dima. Thanks, Kostin, for discussing about this one. I think we have no other questions, no? Would you like to add something? I think we got almost at the end of our session. Would you like to add something? Anybody? Feel free to chime in if you want.
Yeah, just reminding everyone that we're planning on doing one more session, obviously, of this. I think Dan mentioned in all.
Yes. So the next session will be on the 26th of August, our third GReAT Ideas powered by SAS. So we will announce it, but the date is set, 26th of August.
There you go. And then also, when you leave, apparently a survey pops up. It would be greatly appreciated if you folks could maybe provide a little bit of input, because we want to make this better. So don't be shy, answer questions, let us know what we can do to make this a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's very important to tell us if you liked the rooster sounds or not. Like, this is the this is the most important question. Unfortunately, next month I don't think I'm gonna be on the country house. I'm not sure if I'm gonna host the next session anyway. But I hope you guys and ladies and gentlemen, you enjoyed this session. We will be providing a link with a recording for this session. So if you didn't manage to catch anything, if you didn't get a chance to watch it fully, we will be providing a link for this session. Anybody else wants to say anything? If not, I think we will we are ready to finish the session. And I would like to thank again to all the participants. I would like to thank the organizing team. Don't forget to check our Yara training, which will be available really soon. thanks a lot to all the speakers. I hope, and I'm pretty sure it was a pretty interesting session. I'm sorry, I apologize for the technical difficulties that happened in the end. And thanks for sticking with us up until now. I wish you a good day and see you next month.
Ciao,
Bye
guys.
all.
Ciao.
Thank you. Goodbye. Ciao.